The curtain rises once more then on the desert stage of Sakhir as the players take their places for the opening act. Will they enthrall us like they did in 2014 with that titanic battle between Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton? Well, we'll find out shortly as we get underway here in Bahrain. We'll be racing around 3.36 miles of the magnificent Bahrain International Circuit today, with 15 corners and 2 DRS zones into turns 1 and turn 11. That should create some good passing opportunities. Keep an eye out for drivers locking the front left down into the tricky braking zone of turn 10. A tough race in store then for our drivers today, so tell me, Anthony Davidson, what will you be looking out for as the cars make their way down into turn 1?
Well, first of all, let's hope that everyone's well behaved and we can have a nice incident-free start. That initial release is going to be the most interesting thing, and the clean side of the grid will be better rubbered in, so keep an eye out for cars over there potentially making their way through.
So before the off, let's remind ourselves of yesterday's qualifying session with a look at the starting grid. It's Mercedes in pole position then, and Lewis Hamilton completes the front row. Looking down the rest of the grid, we have Vettel, Raikkonen, Max Verstappen and Perez, Ricciardo, Hülkenberg, Grosjean and Carlos Sainz, Kvyat, Alonso, Felipe Massa and Ocon, Palmer, Van Dorn, Lance Stroll and Pascal Wehrlein. Ericsson and Kevin Magnussen rounds off the grid. And with preparations almost complete, let's head down to the track.
some information on Ricardo. They have an issue with their car. They're going to be slow. This is your final lap of the race. Okay, some information on Perez. It looks like the problem is terminal. They're retiring the car. Yellow flag. Okay, clear. Our gap behind is 48.0 seconds. Absolutely awesome. Just amazing. Well done.
Brilliant stuff from Mercedes today. That's another historic win. So, Ant, how exactly did they set themselves apart from the pack today?
Well, I think the track conditions just really suited their car today. Wind, track temperature, you name it. These cars come alive when the tyres are just at the right temperature. So the more easily you can keep them there, the better your race tends to go. And that's exactly what happened. Their car just looks so comfortable out there.
And here are our podium drivers today after that excellent race. They've excelled here, as they so often do, and it's a well-deserved victory. Mercedes, then, are on top today. And after this round of the World Championship, here's how things look in the drivers' table. Our current points leader extends their lead at the top of the championship after a very good result here today. Moving on to the driver of the day then. Anthony Davidson, who would you go for?
Well, he had a great drive today, somewhat unexpected maybe, but I'm going to go for Kevin Magnussen. Quick, clean, and in control. It was everything you could ask for.
On to the constructors then. Mercedes have extended their lead at the top of the standings. Meanwhile, Toro Rosso's strong weekend allows them to continue their march up the table. After all this drama, you'd be mad not to join us for the next race. We hope to see you then. Take care.